Well, good evening everyone. Welcome along to this evening's Audit Committee meeting. Any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device, please could you mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote participants, which we don't appear to have at the moment, I will read this out, but if you please keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, and ideally don't use your camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. The meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their SBC or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If joining using the link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Can I please ask members to speak loudly and clearly into their microphones and to switch the microphone off after speaking? Otherwise, any remote participants that might log in may be unable to hear the next speaker. So, welcome members, officers and any members remotely. The following staff are in attendance either in the chamber, well they are all in the chamber, so it's the Director of Resources Lisa Fillery, Head of Audit Partnership Catherine Woodward, and Head of Finances and Procurement Claire Stanbury, and our Democratic Services Officer Philippa Davies. There are no other officers in attendance, so you are all aware of the emergency evacuation procedures. There is no planned evacuation for this evening, so if the alarm does sound, you know where the exits are, follow me. I assume that no one in the room would need attendance if the fire alarm does go off. Thank you. Apologies for absence and confirmation of substitutes, please, Philippa.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Andy Booth, Councillor Derek Carnell, Councillor Tara No, and Councillor Dolly Worcester, who is substituted by Councillor Hayden Braun. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to mention on record at this point in the proceedings that it was disappointing to receive email from our Democratic Services Officer just a few hours prior to the meeting to state that she'd had several members who'd given their apologies but hadn't confirmed any substitutes. So at that point in time we didn't know whether or not we were going to be quorate this evening. Fortunately, members did come back, and obviously the meeting is going ahead, so we are quorate. But it is disappointing when members do phone in to say that they are unable to attend, but they don't get substitutes. I will mention this at the next meeting as well, should we have more people. But I recall the last Audit Committee meeting, we were only just quorate at that meeting because we'd had several apologies with no confirmations of substitutes or substitutes sent. Thank you. So, move on then. Do members take the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July 2024, minutes number 98 to 102 as a correct record? Thank you, members. Are there any declarations of interest?
The external auditors are having trouble joining, but they are trying.
Oh, right, okay, thank you. Yeah, I've just been informed that the external auditors are having trouble logging in, but they will try their best. Thank you. So we move on then to agenda item number 5, the Audit Committee annual report. And Catherine, would you like to lead off, please?
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 5 on pages 3 to 20 of your report packs is the Audit Committee annual report for last year. So the purpose of this report is to demonstrate how the committee has effectively discharged its duties during the previous year. The committee is required to monitor both of its internal and external audit activity, review and comment upon the effectiveness of the Council's regulatory framework, which does include both risk governance and also to review and approve the annual statement of accounts and to scrutinise the associated strategies and policies. So hopefully this report sets out how that has been achieved, and it covers the following headings. So an introduction by the chairman, the purpose of the report, the purpose of the committee, the membership of the committee and attendance throughout the last year, how the committee has delivered its terms of reference, and how the committee also complies with national guidance for audit committees, and a conclusion. So up to and including section 5 of this report is a summary of the committee's activities, and all of the detail behind this can also be found in the published committee minutes. So this is a factual record of what occurred. Section 6 is a new section that I've included this year, and this summarises the SITFA self-assessment of good practice, which can be found at Appendix B on page 17. And so this is an assessment of the Audit Committee against a SITFA framework, which is a national framework. So hopefully you'll recall at our last committee we did some training, for those of you who were present, and I was waving some documents around which were the SITFA best practice guidance. I think we've got about 120 pages of good practice, and we've managed to combine that into a nice succinct little self-assessment, which isn't 120 pages. So the results are generally positive, and there is one area of non-compliance regarding the appointment of an independent member to the Audit Committee. So I'm aware that this has been discussed at this committee at length and agreed not to proceed, so I'm not making any recommendations that we need to revisit that, as has been agreed by this committee on previous occasions. So there are a few areas where some development and improvement work could be made, and they've been listed in section 6 of the report on page 14, mainly around identifying training needs for the committee by doing a bit of a skills assessment of committee members to see what training they feel would be beneficial. And we can work with the Member Development Board to ensure that everybody knows what we're going to do in terms of training and that it fits with an appropriate programme. And section 7 is the conclusions and also summarises some of that training that we did undertake last year. So once the committee approves this report, it will be presented by the chair to full council to continue to demonstrate to the full council that the committee has achieved its objectives. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got Councillor Palmer first.
It was just one actually, and I think you've covered it. However, I look at this, if a member of the public looked at it, if you look at page 19, you highlighted about the independent person, and you're quite correct, the council did say we shouldn't have one, but maybe that should be referenced somewhere, that a council made a decision not to appoint someone. Because if I was a member of the public looking at that, I'd see that's a major improvement required, and I'd criticise the council. Thank you.
So on page 14 of the report, it does state in there there's one area of non-compliance, and the committee have made this decision not to appoint an independent member, and it will be reviewed again following the next elections. So it is in the body of the report.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. Two, one of them on that same point. So firstly, just could we double check the minutes on attendance, because my memory is that I substituted for Councillor Henderson at the February one, which is how I drew the short straw of becoming the member after that, is my recollection. So if we could just double check that record. I might have my dates wrong, and it was after the annual return, but that is my belief, was that it was February, but I might be wrong about that. And then to counter Councillor Palmer's point, as we are now having a system that demonstrates where we could improve, I think it's worth noting that as an item for discussion. And I'm not sure after the election is the appropriate period of time to wait on that. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, with that, we were asked by this committee when we did the last report from the auditors, which recommended that we assess that is put to bed now until the next election. So that decision has been taken by this committee.
And
Thank you.
On the point of the February audit committee, so that was an extraordinary committee meeting that we held in the committee room rather than this one. So I don't think you were on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I was specifically referring to the July meeting when I was referring to the fact that we were very nearly not quorate at that particular meeting rather than any previous meetings. Right, so do we have any more questions or comments from members? No, okay. Sorry, Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, Chair. I was telling my colleague on the way over here this evening, one of, should I say it while we're online, one of my grumpy old gits stood down now, did his time. We had a audit committee training session, not just for audit, just a general audit training in here. And I told the group, you know, I want a lot of people there. So the grumpy old git came along. He absolutely raved about it afterwards. I don't know if it's the way we put the message, but he was so enthusiastic about the work of the Audit Committee because he didn't realise all the things that were involved and affected and all the rest of it. I'll tell Simon who it was afterwards, but my point is with a lot of these things, it's the way that we sell it as to whether or not members either come along and listen open-minded or they think, oh, boring old audit, I'm not interested in finance, because it's actually a hell of a lot more than finance. So it's just sort of keep it up there. I know people who are heavily involved. It's a bit like when you're doing your leaflet, you've got to think about who it is you want to attract. The people that we really need to attract to our audit overview training are the people who ain't got a clue about finance or ain't got an interest in finance, because that's a very minuscule part of it. It is the whole package. So I just thought I'd contribute that, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. And yes, I had this, Councillor Thompson. Yeah. So I was just going to say briefly that at the chairman's briefing on Monday, I did express a similar view to Lisa, that when Councillor Truelove, the then leader, asked me to chair this auspicious committee, I immediately glazed over thinking, well, I don't do numbers. But as you quite rightly say, Councillor Harrison, it's so much more than the numbers. And over the years that I've been privileged to be chairman of this committee, I've come to enjoy it more and more.
Especially now, eh?
Councillor Thompson.
It was only a little note on the funding. You might tell me that we can't put it in, but it says the council continues to face challenges from the impact of the cost of living crisis, rising inflation, economic pressures. Can we put in there just due to lack of funding from central government? Because I think the public would be good to know that. I think it's sort of missed as if we're just suffering a bit from cost of living, when in fact we're massively reduced since 2008, aren't we? But
we are. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Well, we do bang on about that in most of our other reports. So it's covered usually in the overall budget report and the medium-term financial strategy. The uncertain, not just the lack of funding, it's the uncertainty position we're in as well. So we do cover it.
oh, okay. No, I just thought because it's in the
Lovely. Thank you. So I come back to the recommendations then. I'll take them one at a time. Recommendation 1, that the Audit Committee Annual Report for 23-24, Appendix 1, is agreed. Do I have a proposer? Seconder? So it's Councillor Palmer proposed, Councillor Harrison second. All those in favour? And likewise for recommendation 2, the committee approves the inclusion of the SIPFA checklist to demonstrate how the committee has fulfilled their duties. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Harrison and Councillor Braun second. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And thirdly, Recommendation 3, that the Chair of the Audit Committee presents the report at a meeting of the full Council to demonstrate how the Committee has discharged its duties. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Palmer, as seconder. Councillor Thompson, thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you very much, members. So we move swiftly on then to agenda item number 6 on page 21. So right over to Claire, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Q1 report, providing you with an update on the performance of our Treasury management function so far this year. It's important that we have an effective Treasury management function to ensure that we manage our finances and cash flows in an effective way, whilst ensuring that risks are controlled as far as possible. This report used to be brought to members half yearly, but due to the high profile risks taken by some authorities, which has led to Section 114 notices and exceptional financial support, it's now a requirement to report quarterly. So you will now see this report at each meeting of the Audit Committee. During the quarter that this is reflecting on, the Bank of England base rate remains steady at 5.25%. Whilst this may create difficulties economically, for Swale this higher rate is to our advantage due to the fact that we currently invest more than we borrow. Interest rates are expected to fall over the next 18 months, but our borrowing is currently on a relatively short-term basis, which will allow us to manage the position as the rates fluctuate, so we're not tied into high interest rates on our loans. During the quarter, the Council held borrowing of £10 million, and cash balances vary on a day-to-day basis, but the average cash balance invested was 16.9 million each day. Appendix 1 of the report shows the investment and borrowing balances as at the end of the quarter, and Appendix 2 shows the performance of the Treasury function against the indicators that were agreed in February, and all of those were within target during the quarter. Happy to take any questions.
Members? Councillor Gibson?
Sorry, paying attention. On page 24, 2.14, I'm just, as I say, confirming my reading that means our investment return is 40,000 over budget. So we have made 40,000 more in that quarter than we were expecting to make. And if that is the correct interpretation, what does that mean for the rest of the year and that budget flow? Is that expectation? Thank you.
So the forecast for the year will be included in our monitoring, but as members will know, our budget is technically balanced because we are taking from reserves to balance the budget. So any underspends that are not offset with overspends elsewhere within the authority, which is the first balance that we will do in year, is any underspends and overspends from the monitoring, and any reduction in the requirement to take from reserves will come from there. So it's not an underspend until we are not taking from reserves. So it will be mocked up in the overall forecast and then outturned for the year, and then the year-end position will determine the take from reserves.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Right, so we move to the recommendations then. I'll take both of these together. Recommendations 1 and 2. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Palmer. And a seconder? Councillor Harrison, thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And that brings us to the end of this evening's meeting. So I close the meeting at 7:18. Thank you very much, members.